Another reason I think it took us a long time to get to these aspects of what happened in the 30s, and I'm not the only one writing about this right now, is the Cold War. In the Cold War, there was a very real sense that Western Europe might go communist. There was a thing called Euro-communism. Political parties in Western Europe, many of them were communist. And the argument was the U.S. needs a strong commitment to the Roosevelt idea and to the social safety net, just as Europe needs social democracy in order to protect itself from going communist. So no one ever talked about what was wrong with Roosevelt, because that made the whole, somehow hurt the whole vision that was so important for the period. But we're not in the Cold War anymore, so we don't need to cling to that. Finally, I think in the 50s at least, when the big histories of the New Deal were being written, there was no consensus that strong growth would be the rule for the United States. Now, with those intervening years, we know that strong growth can be the rule if we follow the right policies. So our appreciation of the 20s and our understanding of the exception of the 30s is just different. Why it all matters, the main reason for me is the entitlements. I don't mean to sound corny, but my book is called The Forgotten Man, and there are a lot of different forgotten men in the book. We can talk about that in the question time, but the forgotten man that is relevant for now is the younger generation, is you guys, because you will guaranteed pay higher taxes than you can afford to support older people who are unwilling to do the work to reform the programs that need to be reformed for you out of their laziness and false commitment to old ideals. So the forgotten man is you guys. And I'm a mother, I have 4 kids. I thought that was very relevant. It's also my generation that's failing the younger generation as well, and that we're not doing the reform work of Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. This is not a party political thing. Both parties are making that failure. The Bush administration failed by giving us Medicare Part D, which is nice and important that our senior citizens can get the drugs they need, but if it's at a cost for the younger generation, maybe that cost is too high. I'm going to stop there. I mean to be too gloomy. I loved writing this book. I had a lot of fun doing it. People in it are wonderful. I loved even the left-wingers a lot because they were brave and tried hard, and you know, we all make errors. So a lot of it's a policy. But thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to open up the floor for some Q&A. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll start it off. I just want to read the Schechter case. And like we were talking about beforehand, this comes across as a little sanitized. Could you go into more of the, I guess, government tactics and sort of the arrogance and sarcasm that was actually laid upon the Schechters at trial?
I wanted to read you some of the testimony. The chapter in my book about this is called The Chicken versus the Eagle, because the eagle was the National Recovery Administration. And the chicken people, well, I know one scene that's very, very important. Is the prosecutor used a tactic of belittling. He belittled the Schechters, and they were easy to belittle because they contradicted themselves and because they barely spoke English and they didn't go to college. So the prosecutor said, "You're criticizing this NRA law, but you're not an agricultural economist. You don't have a degree. How can you know that? How do you have the right to criticize a law that knows better than you? How can you criticize a law even if, you know, the law says you shouldn't charge low prices, then you shouldn't charge low prices. Did you go to college?" And the little chicken person says, "No, I don't have much school." That's how they talk. "You're not an economist. You're not an economist." No, no, no. And he's getting smaller and smaller. This was the people say, "I don't have any college. No, I went right to work." And the prosecutor kept saying, "You're not an economist, you're not an economist." And finally the little chicken person pulls himself together and he says, "I'm not an economist. I may not be an economist, but I am an economizer. And I know that I have to charge low prices to beat the guy next door." The man who came to the office said, before, in the beginning stage, when they're collecting evidence, they go to their butcher shop and they badger them to their slaughterhouse. And one of the Schechter brothers said, at first I was nice to him and I showed him all my chickens. I showed him what a broiler is. I showed him the other chicken. I taught him about chickens, the man from the government. But finally I could see that he was talking to my customers, and my customers were upset. And I said to him, Mr. Government Man, again, you'll forgive me for paraphrasing, don't you understand, you've got to be nice to my customers, because he can get good chickens, just as good chickens, next door without any questions from the government. Without it, the very logical, common sense things that every retailer knows. And for that reason, they were wonderful and so poor. And I want to add that they were ambivalent because they were Jewish, and Jews are supposed to be for Roosevelt. That's what their culture was, because that's what they thought. So how could they be? There was a New Deal Butcher Association in their neighborhood, like a cheerleading group for the New Deal and for the NRA. And here they were, and they were on the wrong side. And they were so ambivalent. And I asked them, I feel quite confident about this area because I did talk to one of their descendants, Glenn Asner, about the case. And he had talked to one of the daughters of the Schechters, and he said they were very ambivalent. He was pretty sure they voted for Roosevelt all 4 times. And I said, why did they vote for Roosevelt all 4 times? He said, because he was right on the war. Well, that's an anachronistic thing to say, because the first 2 times there was no war, but that reflected the general attitude. They came from a place where there had been pogroms, where there had been mobs beating up little villages of people like them, and they had a sense that maybe Roosevelt might be protecting them from that, and maybe they were right, but they also saw that he was trashing our business. So I like this ambivalence because that's reality. You are in reality ambivalent about political figures. You don't hate them all or love them. You see both sides.